You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates. Happy Hump Day, Wednesday, August 19th, 2020. A beautiful day it is, and a wonderful day to talk about our favorite subject, Toronto real estate. We are the largest, fastest growing podcast for that subject on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. We have fun over on YouTube as well. Wherever you are, make sure you leave us a like, leave us a subscribe. Make sure you're tuning in, and we're going to continue to put out wonderful content, continuously tracking what's going on in our local real estate market. And there is a lot to talk about today. We're going to, in a matter of 24 hours, it is crazy to see some of the stuff that happens. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the news. And I, as an investor and a broker, want to know from my clients. And you guys are getting the benefit of sharing what I'm reading anyways. Well, here we go. Let's start today talking about how is this recession hitting real estate different than past ones. As the kids would say these days, this one do be hitting different though. And how loud is too loud for the tenant advocacy groups or organizations? They are doing some pretty drastic things. We're going to talk a little bit about that and whether it's correct or not. And yeah, we'll get there. And will Doug Ford pull the rug out from Ontario spending? We're going to get a little bit into politics, which is a very dangerous road to go to. But when the news outlets are talking politics, that's the way we go. And before I start talking about anything and start making funnies, I need to disclose that I am a Christian, okay? I'm a born-again Christian. I attend a church, and I've been saved for a few years now. So don't get overly offended, you Christians out there, by some of these jokes, because today we're going to talk about the sin that exists here in Canada. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I keep singing the Bare Naked Ladies. How long has it been since your last confession? It's been... But how we're going to start off today is the Morneau lamb has been slaughtered, and with all of Trudeau's sins now forgiven, it's time for us as a great nation to move forward with complete freedom in a free land. Chrystia Freeland? I think that's how you say it. Some of the fast facts about her as we kind of roll into our topic here. This is really one of the big things because seems like just yesterday Morneau was dropped on the spit. And so now, first elected in 2013, she has served as the deputy PM since 2019. She led NAFTA negotiations as the foreign affairs minister. And she's a former journalist at the Financial Times and Reuters. This is kind of her background. Seems to be rather optimistic about kind of what she brings. She doesn't have a lot of financial background from what I can tell, but she was a foreign affairs minister. So I'm sure most of her interactions have been with other countries. And obviously the world is a much smaller place. So what is it called when you talk about original sin in Israel? You Tel Aviv. All right, no more sloppy jokes. We're going to move along. We're going to start talking about Toronto real estate. And I really like this article. It came out of the Financial Post. And it's called this: 5 really weird things about Canada's roaring housing market. Things are a little different this time around, as you can imagine, with past recessions. And I really like the way that they lay out some of the key differences in our market from what we've seen in the past. So here's how they talk about it. Canada's housing market beats records in July as pent-up demand unleashed a 26% surge in sales, data showed yesterday. We talked about that yesterday. Go back if you missed it. Go check it out, talking about Korea and their stats. The performance of the housing market during this pandemic recession has been a surprise to bears, says BMO senior economist Robert Kavcic, Kavcic. In fact, that has shaped up to be a bizarro recession for the sector, where what is usually down is up and vice versa. And so here are the things they lay out in this article quite cleanly, the things that are key differences in this housing market against the norm. Here they are. Number 1, every recession during the post-war era has seen a meaningful decline in home construction. Interesting. Except for this one, says Kavcic. In the pandemic recession, the home building has been one of the few sectors able to operate relatively undisturbed, with housing starts beating expectations. And this has been something that was actually a shock to me. This is why early on I thought, you know what, there's going to be a lot of good opportunities with home builders and pre-construction because they're going to be interfered. But they really haven't. And maybe a big part of it is that they pulled back on a lot of the work, and then you blame it on COVID, right? We saw 3 to 6 month delays, but a very interesting difference from what normally happens during a recession. Number 2, new listings that normally rise during a downturn have been, quote, almost fully absent because of social distancing restrictions, right? So usually we'll see a whole bunch of properties come on and people go crazy and be like, oh my God, I gotta sell, I gotta get out of here. Ah, the world is on fire. Quote, this effectively froze the market in time rather than triggering a price correction. And that was one of the things that were absolutely shocking early on in COVID when we saw that the listings dropped almost immediately. Like within a month of seeing the demand drop, we saw the listings drop, and it went almost in tandem within a month or two. That was the moment that we were shouting from the rooftops of the deferral cliff, the top of the cliff, saying, buy, 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 buy. And everyone else was running the other way. But you also had to be very careful because, of course, you needed to be in a financial position to do that. But that was the time. That was the trigger if you were paying attention. But anyways, new listings, they didn't skyrocket because people don't touch my stuff. Don't come in my house with your dirty up fingers. Number 3, home buying demand, meanwhile, has climbed. Contrary to what is normally seen in a recession, Katchich said that this is partly because people in the mid to upper income range of the job market have fared better than those in the lower end. And this is something that's also quite interesting, is clearly this is impacting one people group, the lower end, the lower middle class, really it's the lower class people. And they say this, quote, you'll be hard pressed to find a downtown where the rental market is hit harder than the mid to high end of the resale market, but that might be the case this time around. So what's happening here is we're seeing more of an impact in the rental space, not as much in the purchasing space, because one of the challenges that we have here is affordability. How that's actually protected us is because it's so unaffordable to live here. The people who afford to live here are relatively well off, and they weren't affected by COVID. Very interesting. And so as we continue to have these challenges, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, and all these tenant advocacy groups and all of this, there's going to be a long-lasting challenge faced by this people group that isn't faced across the country and isn't faced across Toronto, that continues to have had demand to purchase real estate. Number 4, and really this overlaps the other two, is the imbalance has tightened housing markets across Canada, which we just found out last month. There were just 2.8 months of inventory on a national basis. That is so low across the country. The lowest reading on record, in fact. At the local market level, a number of Ontario markets shifted from months of inventory to weeks of inventory in July. So we saw things get off the chain busy. In my opinion, the top of the year, but absolutely a replacement for a spring market that we should have seen early in 2020 came late. Number 5, another curious aspect of this market is the rift starting to emerge between condos and single family detached homes. And we talked about that. We caught that early, thanks to you guys, actually. Again, this conversation that we have is an absolutely beautiful thing where you guys kind of tell me stuff and then I say it and I look like a genius. It's wonderful. Isn't it great? But this is what happens. A lot of people are saying, you know what, condos, they're not doing as good. And so we really looked at that number and we saw days on market are going up, which is still the case. But now the news is smart to it, and we're all recognizing this change. In fact, single detaches are up in Toronto 15% annually since April, while condo prices are down since April almost 3%. So when we look year over year, it's really not a true picture. It actually overly inflates the market, and people have corrected me on this too. It's very important to note when we're looking at stats for July and August, we are comparing against a different month. If we were to look at these last couple of months as really the spring of 2020, it skews them into the better. So if we were to look back from April, we actually see a decline in condo prices. Very interesting stuff going on. Economists expect the pent-up demand to dwindle in months to come. And this seems to be a common message too. We started saying this a month or two ago, but now the news is picking it up. People are very cautious. And this is why I think we're going to have a bit of a pause, a bit of a lull. We're going to see seasonal declines in price, which is natural anyways, over the next few months. And why I wouldn't have been running to buy something last month, and why I would be a little cautious this month, unless there's a deal that you cannot refuse. But the 4-month average of $18.2 billion in sales during the pandemic trails pre-COVID levels of about $21 billion. So all this crazy money being spent does not total the crazy money we spent in 2019. So we're not really there yet. We still have some catching up to do, as they say. Super low mortgage rates are going to help drive that. Question also remains about what happens when we get off CERB, when it winds down, and we expect that impact will continue to hit the lower end of the housing market and rental properties the hardest. And rental properties is where we're going to go next. We are going to go next. They ran the numbers. They asked a lot of people, they ran numbers, and did you know it would be a sin to divide the opposite by the hypotenuse? According to their findings. No, this is really the findings from the star.com. Toronto neighborhoods hit hardest by COVID-19 also have the steepest eviction filing rates, says a new study. As Ontario's eviction moratorium has lifted, new research shows that Toronto neighborhoods where tenants have faced the highest eviction filing rates in recent years mirror those of where COVID-19 has hit the hardest. So not only are you going to be evicted, you're going to get COVID on the streets. The findings shared exclusively with the Star, that's convenient, suggest that if a wave of evictions follows the pandemic, as tenant advocates fear, we'll get to them in a second, residents of the same neighborhood will bear the brunt of a secondary crisis. Quote, it really shows that evictions are hitting communities that are already being hit by COVID, and so we've got these kind of compounding challenges. And rightly so in many ways. That has pissed a lot of people off because it's like, where's my health? Where is my housing? And I can't name names, but it is very difficult for me being in this industry now to see people, specifically landlords, which is who I usually deal with the most, dealing with like these tenants that I can't even. On a scale of 1 to even, I can't. Right? And so it is a lot of power in favor of the tenant right now. A lot of power with this evictions being completely on the moratorium. But obviously, recently there's been changes made, and we're going to talk about that. But what is led? It's really escalating. It's, in my opinion, it's escalating. I think staying outside the mayor's office is one thing, but now it's escalated, in my opinion, to the legal system. It is getting very serious. Here's an article from CBC. Toronto protesters block sheriffs from conducting evictions amid COVID-19. Activists and protesters gathered outside a Toronto courthouse on Tuesday morning to physically block the city's rental enforcement units from conducting evictions. The blockade, which began at 7 a.m., saw dozens of demonstrators occupy 2 ramps leading to the parking garage at the Superior Court of Ontario. Here's what they say. The event was organized by People's Defence TO and Keep Your Rent Toronto. Very familiar organizations that are causing a whole bunch of nuisances to the mayor, to the premier, all of them, both of which have been fighting efforts by landlords to evict tenants during the COVID-19. Kabir Joshi, an organizer of the two groups, said the demonstration was just one of an ongoing series of community organized events to prevent property management companies from evicting vulnerable tenants. And just to jump down, they posted Parkdale organized Keep Your Rent. They posted a little Twitter thing which really highlights that. Today, Toronto tenants prevented evictions from being enforced in our city. More than 40 households remained intact because of this action, but it doesn't stop here. So in other words, you stopped 40 evictions. When landlords and the government refuse to act, we will take that action ourselves. And it's not going to stop here, guys. It is not. This is escalating very quickly. Last month, obviously, Queen's Park passed a bill 184 called the Protecting Tenants and Strengthening Communities Housing Act, which received widespread condemnation from housing rights activists who say the law gives landlords excessive power to evict tenants. And it also has the City of Toronto voting against it as well, 22-2. Under the new law, landlords can offer a direct repayment plan to tenants who are behind on rent without going through the landlord tenant board, which they agree to. But here's the point here. The province has said the bill actually helps tenants. But critics and legal analysts have warned that the law would permit landlords to use a tenant's refusal to sign onto a repayment plan as justification to evict. If you're a lawyer, and specifically a paralegal that deals with tenant rights, feel free to comment down below. Let us know. Is that the case? This is the first I'm hearing that. I don't think if you refuse to sign that you can be evicted. I don't think that is the case, but that's what they're saying here now. So maybe they've done a second reading and people are a little bit more cautious that way. My understanding is you don't need to sign it. But my advice, if anything, is if a landlord comes to you as a tenant and shows you a piece of paper and says, sign this, just talk to your lawyer. Really, just talk to your lawyer. It's not that hard. But obviously, it's easier in the meantime to get really loud and bang your tambourines and get all excited. But here's what I equate it to. So I was just interested. I went over onto justice.gc.ca, and under the criminal code RSC 1985 C-46, under section 139.1, it says this: everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice in a judicial proceeding. That is the definition in the criminal code of obstruction of justice. So I don't know, but it seems to me as though these peaceful protests, peacefully being really loud in a condo building, are now turning into willful obstruction of justice. So let's not let it be the same people that are really pointing fingers at Trump. Now, I know you guys don't care or track Trump because, we're in Canada, right? So we don't do that. But we should maybe just show up and show them the support. We should all be together. This is Canada. We'll be nice. We'll go to Mickey D's, or I guess Starbucks, because the people that are out these places, they're spending money on Starbucks. And we'll get them their favorite drink, a double standard, hold the whip. Oh, my goodness. Speaking of double standards, if the wages of sin are death, do women get paid 30% less death? That one's going to get me in trouble. Let's move along before anyone hears it. Will Doug Ford pull the rug out from Ontario spending? So right now, things are up in the air like crazy. And I try just to give updates on the school board thing because I think it's great that we're making progress and we're reopening. But now is the first time I'm hearing the potential for delays. So start of school will be delayed for kids, quote, unless we're able to pull off a miracle. The Toronto District School Board's interim director of education, Carlene Jackson, said Tuesday that barring, quote, a miracle, it is very unlikely that thousands of students at the TDSB will be back learning on September 8th as scheduled. Very interesting. This is just kind of coming out, and they're saying this. Their assessment comes in the wake of a memo to school board Tuesday from Stephen Lecce, the Ontario Education Minister. In the memo, he said the board may stagger the start of the school year by up to 2 weeks if they feel that it won't make the start of school safer. So he's like, you guys can, if you want to extend it for 2 weeks, you can do that. But the board will not need to seek special approval to implement this staggered start. So they're saying facing a course of criticism about a lack of funding to properly space elementary school kids, the province said last week the boards could dip into their reserve fund to pay for extra teachers if they wish to do so. So it's up to the board's discretion. Use your own money. If you feel like it's worth spending these reserve funds, which weren't allocated for that in the first place, in order to buy yourself an extra 2 weeks, then you have the right to do it. So I have a feeling that they'll probably do it because ultimately this is an example. Now, I guess this is all political. Like, as I'm thinking about it on the outskirts, this is completely political. This is just an ongoing challenge that we've had between the teachers union and the government. Like, this is no different. So they're saying, yeah, we're allowing you an extra 2 weeks, no problem. Here you go. We're opening the opportunity to let you do it. You're going to pay for it, but you can do it. And meanwhile, they're going to say, well, we're probably going to have to do it, right? I would think from a position of the teachers union, you're probably going to want to do it because you're going to want to stand on the position that the Ontario government is pushing you into quick and you're spending the money you need to try and buy some time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see an extension. They were taking polls with elementary parents and nearly 25% of them said they won't send their kids back to class. They asked them different questions on whether if they return to school, regular school day model. 71% said yes, 29% said no. They asked if they return with smaller classes, let's say 15 to 20 students. 77 said yes, 23 said no. And among parents of secondary school students, 83% said they plan to send their kid back to physical high school where they'll be in smaller cohorts of 15 students, while 17% said they'd keep their kids at home. So still a lot of people saying they're going to keep their kids at home. However, it would seem that the high school kids are a little more opt to going and the younger kids not so much. But we need to take the risk. If we put the kids back in school, we need to take that risk with COVID. Like, you can't have it both ways, right? Let's put it this way. Adultery is a sin. You can't have your Kate and Edith too. That's my favorite one of the day. That's so good. Oh, it's so good. Okay. Queen's Park makes plans for a decade of pain. So as we transition now, as we can see, there's tension in the teachers union. And so on the tail end of all of this, actually, before we go to the tail end, let's go to the face of all this. When COVID happened, you guys know, you saw it, the Ontario government, the Conservatives, Doug Ford, who is ultra conservative, cut spending like crazy, all of a sudden changed his tune. Everyone's like, oh, is he a new guy? Is he a new man? The COVID thing, it scared him straight. It scared him straight into the straight and narrow. Now he cares about people. What was I saying? I'm like, no. This is something that if you're going to willfully keep people away from, you're going to keep them at home. You got to compensate them. You got to protect businesses. You got to protect everybody. You got to keep the economy rolling. And this is what he did. And now as we round to the tail end of all of this, we are seeing that I was right. I was right. We're going to see the same Doug Ford that you saw pre-COVID. COVID is an emergency. But out of the Star, which I'm realizing really quickly is a very liberal paper, they would have us believe that we should live in a constant state of emergency because let's face it, yes, we've got COVID, which is an emergency, but we should look at everything as an emergency. We are in a time of crisis and that will last for good. So here's what they say. Queen's Park makes plans for a decade of pain. Here is his plan in a nutshell, talking about Doug Ford. Once we corral COVID-19, it's back to business as usual. Get ready for cuts to public services. Quote, we're going to continue being very fiscally conservative. So Ford is putting on his pre-COVID mask, and we're starting to see this. The pain has already started, as the article says. Despite setting aside $10 billion for contingencies as the pandemic continues, Queen's Park shows little interest in spending it. So just because we have $10 billion, why would you not blow it? I mean, that only makes sense, right? Well, maybe not. It depends who you ask. Even to protect the health of 2 million children and their families? Yes, even at that cost. No one knows what a truly safe September in our schools would cost, but parents and staff can already see that the current plan falls short. There's example one. Here's a question. If Ford and companies won't even support schools during a global health crisis, what else is at risk? Well, we're finding out already. In July, government cut $100 emergency payment to social assistance recipients, many of whom only get $733 a month as it is. And this is a bad omen, depending on how Ottawa changes the EI, because if your Liberals go in, they turn the type up. They turn. I'm getting a little fired up here. Getting fired up. If the Liberals shut off the tap, well, but God forbid that the Ontario PCs shut off the tap too, right? Thousands of Ontarians may soon be applying to provincial income support because they're not getting from the feds. And you damn conservative government, oh my goodness. In long-term care, the government's announcement of money to build more homes wasn't new money, just a tweaked re-announcement. So there you go. They didn't spend money on your long-term care homes, right? He didn't care. He didn't care about keeping people healthy, right? He doesn't care about those things. He's more concerned about the bottom line. Wherever you stand on the political spectrum, the main thing that I'm getting out of this article, as is being told from a very liberal news source, is that we can expect Doug Ford to look like he did pre-COVID as we begin to reopen our doors. And that's the end of it. Whether you like it or not, that is what they're saying is going to happen. He said this, instead of spending the $10 billion that we got, he said, quote, any unused contingency funds at year end will go towards reducing the province's net debt position. Maybe paying off debt's not such a bad thing, and of course is a very libertarian or very conservative perspective, right? That's a good thing because COVID is not the only emergency we face. They go and talk about other emergencies. We got long-term care emergencies. We got poverty emergencies. We got loss of good, steady jobs emergencies. We got racial injustice emergencies. There are many more. We got climate change emergencies, right? If we don't take action now, flooded basins will be the least of our worries. It's up to all levels of government from all parties to work together. So again, they want us to live, according to this article, in a constant state of emergency. We can deal with the debt. That's right. The debt is manageable. It's just money. It's just money, right? And it will remain so. Interest rates are at rock bottom lows, just like Trudeau implies, right? We got eternal low rates. We are in the hellfire of low rates. Can't go back up. In fact, we're going to go into negative rates, right? Is that our plan? That's our strategy? Sounds like a winning strategy to me. We're going to be like California, right? We're going to have a wealth tax. We're going to scare all the high net worth people away because you think it's not about raising more money. We're not increasing taxes. Guys, understand, we're only taxing the rich. We're only taxing the people who are creating jobs and bringing businesses to Ontario in many ways. Not in every case, but in many ways. So let's just push them away. Let's remove that tax base because that socialism is what's going to save us. And I don't understand it, but whatever. I mean, you guys understand my viewpoint. I am clearly conservative. But, and you know what? As the conservative says, I'm going to throw the Bible, and the Bible tells us the wages of sin are death. But honestly, after all these taxes, it's more likely it's just going to be more of a tired feeling. Because we've already been taxed to death. Let's face it. But Doug Ford, it's not like he's not spending money, right? It's not like he's not spending money. it's just a difference of priorities, because just yesterday they announced that they will begin work on building the controversial Scarborough subway extension. This is from BlogTO. Ford announced today the province is one step closer to breaking ground on the Scarborough subway extension, which has been a discussion point for residents and politicians alike for many, many years. We've been waiting for over 30 years for subways, people of Scarborough. This is what Ford said. The crowding and the congestion on the Scarborough RT is a disaster, and we're going to fix it. So by Thursday, which is tomorrow, they're going to issue a request for proposal. They're going to ask 3 potential tunneling teams. They're starting to put this together. They want this contract issued by mid-2021, and it'll have 3 stops: Kennedy Station, Shepherd, and McCowan, and expected to create and support thousands of jobs in construction. The government projects it will carry upwards 100,000 daily commuters within 20 years' time. Maybe the spending, he doesn't want to have the spending happen in things like long-term care homes or in schools, but there's definitely a need for spending in his mind in transit. So it's not about not spending, it's about spending wise, it's about cutting back, cutting the fat, and that is the approach that Doug Ford has. But if you really don't like that, well, recognize not only did former late Mayor Rob Ford be an advocate for construction on the transit, but so is John Tory, who is actually thanking Doug Ford for pushing ahead on the project today. I like to think we all agree, if we're going to agree on something, is we need better transit. We need to help people. We need infrastructure, create jobs. Let's get the economy rolling again. Maybe Doug Ford isn't so cheap. Maybe he just has a difference of priority. I believe your sin has been covered by the blood of Christ, by the blood of Jesus, and that's me. That's my perspective on things, and I believe it applies to everybody. But ultimately, it was his choice. If we were to ask, what was God's choice currency to save the world? It's definitely not Bitcoin. Not even precious metals. Not even precious metals. And it's definitely not the US dollar. Jesus chose to use PayPal. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'm going to be back tomorrow with more as we continue to navigate and just understand what's going on in the Toronto real estate market. I know there's been a ton of news today. I'm very interested to see if we have this much news tomorrow. This is crazy again. I haven't seen this much news coming out in a single day in weeks. And I like it. Aha! Make sure you give us a sub, give us a subscription. I guess that's the same thing. Give us a like and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about our content here. If you have any topics of discussion, I've already got a couple in the kitty, but I can't really pull them out because obviously we had so much today. So I'll get to those in the coming days. I'll see you next time. Take care and keep it real.